My hope today is that you hear exactly what God has to say to you, or maybe for some of you, maybe just remind you of. But this is an incredible word, and I want to just get right back to it. This is Mark chapter 4, in case you missed it on the front end. And this is verse 35, and we'll jump into it there. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, this is Jesus talking, Jesus said to his disciples, let us go over to the other side. And leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. And there were also other boats with him. Everybody say with him. Let's start right there, because not everybody in the story is with Jesus. Not everybody who is around Jesus is with Jesus. Not everybody who's excited about Jesus is with Jesus. Not everybody who saw the miracles are actually with him. Not everybody who heard the preaching are actually with Jesus. This is a powerful part of the story, because there's a lot of different people in this passage, and not all of them are with him, although they are around him, or although they are physically with him in the moment. And I know that we can make a comment like that and go, oh, amen, because not everybody who is with Jesus is actually with Jesus. And that makes sense when there's people in the crowd who oppose him, right? I mean, it makes sense if there's Pharisees there, because the Pharisees were often around him, but they weren't with him. I mean, that makes sense. But it makes sense when people are amongst him and they're just trying to get something from him. They're not really with him. They just want something from Jesus. I mean, that makes sense. Nobody in this story, nobody in this first couple of passages, nobody in there is against Jesus. Everybody in the story is for him. Everybody in the story is excited about what he's saying and what he's doing. I mean, nobody's opposed to Jesus in the story. And yet, not everybody in the story is with him. I mean, the disciples are certainly with him, right? The people that Jesus turns to and says, hey, let's go over to the other side. They're absolutely with Jesus. Matter of fact, they're like, hey, we got boats. Hop in our boat, Jesus. We'll take you over. You want to go to the other side? Come on. We'll go to the other side. That group of people, 100% with Jesus. But it also said that other boats were with him, right? And we talked about the 120, that entourage that kind of traveled with Jesus, that would go around where Jesus was. And, I mean, we're not specifically told that's who these other boats are, but we could reasonably believe that. And if it wasn't them, and there was some group of people that decided to go with him, got in the boats and went with him. But then there's another group of people who were with him in a moment, but they weren't really with him, and that's the crowd. And I want to talk about the crowd for just a moment, because there's always this tendency to get pulled to be a part of the crowd. Right, because we just don't want to get left out, one. And two, and we just want to go with the majority sometimes, even if at moments we know in our heart, I don't really want to go in that direction, but I'll do it because everybody else is doing it. I'll agree with that just because everybody else is agreeing with that. But if we got real transparent, I don't really think that way, and I don't really feel that way. I just didn't want to be the guy who stood out. I mean, am I preaching to myself? There's this pull to the crowd, but the crowd, man, they are with him in a moment. They will show up where Jesus shows up to, but they're not really with him. They'll get excited when he does the miracles. And check this out. The crowd who's with him in a moment, but not really with him, they'll tell all their friends about Jesus. I don't want to get too much into my message for next week, but the crowd will tell friends about Jesus, and we consider that like a foundational part of following Jesus. Like, you got to tell people about him. The crowd was good at telling people about Jesus. Jesus would show up, start healing a couple of people. Man, that crowd would go crazy, get the word out to the whole city. By nightfall, everybody in the town, everybody in the village is showing up, bringing the sick, bringing the lame, bringing the demon-possessed, whoever they could get to Jesus. Man, they were trying to get them to Jesus so Jesus could do something. But the crowd was good about getting the word out. They would get excited about the miracles. They would participate in the miracles. They would amen the message, the sermon. Like, they would get excited about that. Tell people, man, nobody teaches like this guy. Nobody preaches like this guy. Nobody does it the way he does. You got to come and hear this guy. Man, he's got a way of putting it that we haven't even heard before. He's got a way of speaking this into our lives that, man, just not everybody does. Like the Pharisees, they teach and they know what they're talking about, but Jesus, man, it's different. And the crowd got all these people spun up. It's crazy, though. Jesus is always dismissing the crowd. Jesus will walk away from the crowd. He'll even speak hard things just to cause them to disperse. And he'll say stuff like, if you don't eat my flesh and drink my blood, then you can have no part in what I am doing. I mean, that's a hard word for them. That's a hard word for us. Because we're like, well, what does that even mean? And people would just turn and walk away from Jesus, and he would bust up this crowd that would show up to hear what he had to say. Now, look, I'm not saying we ought to bust up the crowd and try to thin it out. That's not what I'm trying to communicate at all, so please don't hear that. But what I'm saying is not everybody who was with him in the moment was really with him. And the thing is, man, there's not a better place for you to be than with Jesus. Like, the best place for you to be is with Jesus. But not near him, not around him. Man, I'm talking with him. The safest place for you to be, regardless of what's happening in your world, is with Jesus. The best place for you to be is with Jesus. Not near him, not around him, not excited about what he's doing. I'm talking with him. And I noticed something about this passage, and this probably excites me more than anything, and I don't know if it'll hit you this way, but I noticed what happened for them to be able to go with Jesus, to be with Jesus. And I was always passing over this. I saw it last night. So here's the thing. It says, Jesus says, hey, let's go over to the other side. And my assumption is, all right, Jesus, well, let's just hop in a boat and we'll go over to the other side. Do you realize some decisions had to be made for them to go with Jesus? Like, they had to make a series of decisions in order to actually go with him, to be with Jesus. That's the best place for you to be, right? That's the safest place for you to be with Jesus, for them to be with Jesus. Man, they had to make some decisions. Today, I know this is going to be hard for some of you because you're coming back from vacation and you're in recovery from vacation mode, and I get it. Some of you ain't even made it back yet, and tomorrow you're going to need a vacation from your vacation because you're still trying to get home, but you are watching online, and amen for that. So I realize what I'm about to say and ask or propose to you maybe is a little heavy, but listen, today is decision day for some of y'all. For some of you all, today is a day you're going to have to make a decision. You need to make a decision. Look at your neighbor and say, it's decision day. It's decision day. Everything in this passage, man, decisions are being made. And listen to me, as decisions are being made, it is altering the course of their feet. Man, they are making decisions, and it is changing the direction of their life. Today, for some of you, it's a day that you're going to have to make some decisions. And I don't want you to be scared of that because you're used to making decisions all the time. I don't know who all went to the Army Western game last night, but that's a game like where you got to make a decision. Because you can't go to a football game, and I'm talking really go to a football game. I'm not talking about going to a football game with ulterior motives because you just want to hang out with some people and you don't care who wins. I'm talking about people who are actually at the game because of the game. Like, you got to pick a winner, right? And yesterday was kind of a hard thing, and someone just spoke up like they could talk out of their seat and said, who did you root for? Like, because Western and Army, and they know I'm in the military. I'm like, well, I cheer for Western because that's where I went to school. But Alex Sewell and I were talking about it. We were sitting next to each other, and he was like, he kind of whispered this, so I didn't even talk to him about if it was okay to say this, but oh well. He was like, he said, I don't even want Western to win this game. He said, this is the only game I don't want them to win. I feel bad that they would win this game. Like, the Army should win. I'm like, I'm with you. If the Army's fighting somebody, we want the Army to win, right? I mean, if the Army's in a contest, like, you want Army to do their thing, and so I get that. So and I'm like, man, there's kind of a part of me like, man, those boys came all the way down from New York, and they're about something that's bigger than any of us, right? Bigger than anybody in the stadium. They're giving their lives over to a service that some people just can't even fathom or understand. Man, it'd be awesome for them to have a victory in this place. Yeah, I want our nation to win our nation's wars. Like, well, yeah, that's a good thing. But at the same time, they also go to school at the United States Military Academy, and I want Western Kentucky University to beat the United States Military Academy because that's just, I mean, it is what it is. Like, I want them to win the football game, and praise be unto God, we won it because everybody knows Western will have a tendency to lay down after halftime and just quit on everybody and give up the whole game. But, man, they didn't do that yesterday. Like, they pushed through and they beat Army. Like, they made a decision. Now, at the same time, like, when it comes to fighting our wars, like, Western, because they just need to stay on the heel. Let the Army do that thing, because we can't quit at halftime in combat. You got to push through. You got to bring the win. Decisions, man. Decisions are a part of our life. And some of you today, you're going to have to make some decisions that are going to alter your steps. You're going to alter the course of your life because of decisions that you need to make. They had to make a series of decisions to be with Jesus, to go with Jesus. If you really want to go where Jesus is calling you to go, it will require you to make more than a decision to say a prayer and to go through some water. Okay? Like if you really want to go where he's calling you to go, it's going to require a little bit more than want to. It's going to require some decisions where you're going to have to step out and you're going to have to move and you're going to have to walk away from some things. The scripture says the first thing they did was they left the crowd, leaving the crowd, right? That's how it started. Leaving the crowd, they took Jesus as he was along and they put him in the boat, like they brought him into the boat with them. They left the crowd and they took Jesus just as he was in the boat. For some of you, man, for you to really go, this has been a theme of 2019, y'all. Like this has been a part of what I've been preaching, what God has been speaking into my life, and I've been trying to share it with you as a church since January. For you to really go where God is calling you to go, you're going to have to leave some things behind. I mean, you're going to have to walk away from some things. They left the crowd to go with Jesus. And there was nothing wrong with the crowd. The crowd liked Jesus, but they had to walk away from the crowd that liked Jesus in order to go where Jesus wanted to go. And maybe it's not a crowd, a physical kind of thing for you. Maybe it's not a physical location, but some of you, you're trying to step into a new thing, carrying a bunch of old things with you, and you don't have the capacity for it. Like you can only hold so much in your hands. You can only focus on so much in your head. You can only give your heart over to so much. And you're trying to get into a place that God is calling you to by carrying a bunch of stuff with you, and you ain't got the capacity for it. You're going to have to leave some things behind. Can I get more specific? For some of you, it's attitude. Until you let go and leave behind your ugly attitude, you're not going to be able to step into what God has for you. And that rhymed, so it's true. I've been playing it. It's hard to speak hope into people's lives if you're being ugly to people. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to attitude. Like you want to hold about being rude and ugly and nasty because you got to have your way and you got dropped as a kid and nobody liked you and you didn't get picked to play on the kickball team that you wanted to be on, and now you're fighting against the whole world, and so you got this attitude like everybody owes you something and you're going to get yours. Man, it's hard to speak peace into people's lives when you're living like that. It's hard for you to share the love of Jesus when you're sharing the ugliness of some woundedness from your past. Like you got to let go of some things. You got to walk away from some things. You got to say, you know what? Yeah, I got hurt, and that was a horrible moment in my life, but it's nothing compared to what God wants to bring me into. And so I'll let go of all this stuff that gives me strength and gives me stability right now, because it's not really strength or stability anyways, and I'll step into what God has for me. You got to leave behind some things if you want to step into what God has for you. And for some of you, man, it's an attitude. But listen, for some of you, it's behavior. Now, I know it's tough to talk about behavior because we live in a culture that for the longest time tried to correct behavior, and we completely ignored the fact that, man, God has to do the change in people. But some of y'all, God's been changing for a long time, and you're still holding on to some behaviors that's not of Him. For some of you, you've been holding on to something for a little while. You keep acting in a way, and I don't know what your mind is drawing, and that's why I'm being a little bit generic with this right now, because your mind already took you somewhere when I started talking about behavior. And chances are, and I hope, or maybe you need to do a little self-reflection, that you thought about something with yourself, not somebody else. Because this ain't for them, this is for you. Right? God's speaking a word into your life today. He'll speak a word into their life too. But the chances are, man, we hold on to some behaviors that we have become so accustomed to for whatever reason. Like we're just comfortable in it. We like that part. We like the identity it gives us. But whatever the reason, we hold on to it. And God's saying, look, though, if you're going to go where I'm taking you, man, you're going to have to let go of that stuff because that's old you. That's not new you. That's who you used to be. Man, you can't hang on to an old life and have a new life, right? You can't hang on to an old way and walk in a new way. You can't walk in darkness and be light to the world. And some of us care more about walking in darkness than we do about being light to the world. And so we're okay with being light Sunday morning. We're okay with being light Wednesday night. We're okay with being light at moments when we need to be light. But the rest of the time, we want to walk in darkness, and you can't do both. To go where he's taking you, to step into what he's calling you to, man, you got to walk away from some things. And then I'm just going to go ahead and say this because it worked in the first service, so I'll say it in this service too, even though I didn't really want to. For some of you, there's some people in your life that you need to walk away from. And I wasn't going to share that because at first I was like, no, somebody's going to use that against me and they're going to leave their wife or they're going to leave their husband because they decided, man, I don't need to be, that person's a bad person in my life. That's not what I'm talking about. That's a different covenant. That's completely different. But for some of you, you've surrounded yourself with people that are not good for you. Let me step a little bit harder. I'm sorry. I just apologize right now. Some of you, you've used the excuse. I just want to warn you, okay? Listen, please receive this with kindness and gentleness because that's how I mean it. You're using Jesus as an excuse, and I want you to be careful because you're using the excuse of, well, Jesus hung out with people who were nothing like him. And that's right. But I want you to be careful if that's how you're walking because Jesus loved the prostitute, but he didn't sleep with her. Jesus loved the prostitute, never became a prostitute. Jesus loved the tax collector, wasn't swindling people out of their money. Jesus loved people who were nothing like him, but his objective was not to be like them and use that as an excuse. His objective was to win them to himself. That's why he came. So be careful when you're picking the people that you're keeping around you. Some of you, man, you're not trying to win them to Jesus. You're just trying to use an excuse to do what you want to do and be okay with it and call it, well, Jesus hangs out with people who are nothing like him, so I'm good with that too. Well, I'm good with it too as long as you're leading them to Christ. I'm good with it too, and I want you to receive that in a loving way, and here's the reason why, because some of you are surrounding yourselves with people that are keeping you on the beach, and I know the beach is a cool place to be, but God's got something else on the other side of the lake. But you're going to have to get in the boat to go to the other side of the lake, and it's going to require you to make some decisions that may be hard to make and maybe are hard to understand, but I'm just telling you, if the safest place for you to be, if the best place for you to be is with Jesus, isn't it worth walking away from whatever you got to walk away from just to be with him? Don't let the enemy convince you that it's safe right here on the shore. Don't let the enemy convince you that it's better with the crowd and God will work it out because you may miss out on what God really has for you. They had to leave the crowd in order to go with Jesus. But here's the other part of it, and this is the part that I had to think through for a minute. They had to take Jesus with them. For them to be with Jesus, they had to take Jesus with them. And some of you all, in order to step into what God really has for you, you're going to have to take Jesus with you. You started praying for a new job, and God gave you a new job, and then you didn't even take him with you. Right? You started asking God to move a mountain. God moved a mountain, and you didn't even walk into this new reality, this new dimension of your life with Jesus. You said, thank you, God, when he did it, and then you forgot. Then you walked away from it. And I already know the argument. The argument said, well, yeah, but Jesus is in me, so isn't he with me wherever I go? Well, it didn't look like it when you made that decision. Because sometimes you make some decisions and you don't bring Jesus into it. So yeah, I'll get with you on Jesus is inside of you and with you where you are, but why didn't you bring him into that? I mean, we walk into things and we do some things sometimes that we intentionally don't take him with us. And if you want to be where he's at, you're going to have to go with him. I just think it's interesting that even though Jesus said, let's go to the other side of the lake to cross over from where they were to where they were going, they not only had to leave something behind, but they had to intentionally take him with them. And they do. And because they're with Jesus, and I just wanted to make sure that we're clear on this before we get in the next passage, because it looks like stuff starts to fall apart here in just a minute. He says, go, and they go, so they are absolutely in God's plan for their life. They are participating in God's plan for their life. Like there's not a better place for them to be than when they're with Jesus. But check out this next passage, and this is, I think it's important for us today. It's not a new thing, but it's important to call our attention to. Verse 37, so they get in the boat, other boats are with them. Verse 37, and a furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Everybody say squall. And I just like the word. I think because it sounds like squeal. But squall, like it's a term that we don't use a whole lot. So in some of your translations, it says storm and not squall. Some of your translation, it says a tempest. It's trying to describe what's happening on the water. Furious squall, furious storm. When Mark wrote the Gospel of Mark, man, he was getting his information from the Apostle Peter, the guy who walked with Jesus, and he chose his words carefully. When he wrote this word that we translated furious storm, he wrote the Greek word that if we could translate, it would take several words to do it. Basically, it describes a storm that came up out of nowhere on the Sea of Galilee. Okay? So the Sea of Galilee was notorious for storms that would just come out of nowhere. The geographical reason is because it's about 700 feet below sea level at most of its parts, 640-something feet below sea level at other parts. But because it's basically down in a hole, surrounded by mountains, man, the wind would come in off the Mediterranean Sea. And even though this was a little further inland, it was like those mountain ranges would funnel that wind, and it would hit the water. And depending upon the temperature of the water, man, a storm could come up out of nowhere, and you never see it coming. Like all storms form somewhere, right? Then they would just form right there on the Sea of Galilee. And here's the thing. They're exactly where they need to be. They are with Jesus in the boat. It was his idea, and they go right into a storm. See, don't let the enemy convince you that because storms are happening that you're not where God wants you to be. The storms are often an indicator that God is at work in your life and there is something coming against you. The storm's often an indicator that God is at work in your life and there is an enemy that maybe you can't see coming against you. Like it's an indicator. It's not the only indicator, let me stress that, but it is an indicator. Some of you have no opposition in your life. Opposition isn't a bad thing if you are walking where God is calling you to walk, regardless of what it feels like, regardless of what it looks like. But it's not the only indicator. It's an indicator, but it's not the only one. You know how I know that? Because the Sea of Galilee that day didn't care whether those men followed Jesus or not. The people who got caught up in that storm that were with Jesus were just like the people who were out fishing that night, because they always were fishing out that night and got caught in the same storm who weren't with Jesus. You know why the same storm happened to the people that were with him and weren't with him? Because the Sea of Galilee did not care if they followed Jesus or not. The Sea of Galilee just happens to be a place that is perfect for storms to just form up out of nowhere. Fierce storms, furious storms. The word fury speaks to the fact that it has no mercy, it's relentless. I think it's interesting that things happen on the Sea of Galilee the way they happen, because it's a lot like life. And that's what I wanted to share with you about the storm, because for some of you, you can already put two and two together. Life doesn't care whether you follow Jesus or you don't. Life's going to happen to people. You know why life happens to people? Because life is a place where storms can just pop up out of nowhere. I mean, it just is. Like, things can happen in a moment, and you don't even see them coming. Some of you showed up this morning, and that's what's going on in your life right now. Man, you were dealing with storms that you did not see coming. You were going through things that you weren't expecting to have to go through. You're having to deal with things that you didn't plan on having to deal with. The storm that they're dealing with is a furious storm. It has no mercy. It is relentless, and they're having to work through it. You can be a follower of Jesus, and life happened to you, and you're going to have to work through them. You can be not a follower of Jesus, and life will happen to you, and you're going to have to work through it. Being a follower of Jesus does not mean that the storm storms are any less worse or fierce or furious or whatever it is. No, but it gives us an ability to understand and to have peace and to know that this storm ain't going to be the end. Now, that's important if you're going through a real storm. If you're just having a little thing that you're dealing with and it kind of gets on your nerves and make you frustrated, I get that. But if you're having to go through a thing where you're just having to survive, I don't know if anybody showed up this morning and you understand what it's like to be a survivor. Like you, enough life has happened to you that you came through it and you're just thankful it's over with now. You're thankful that you made it out of it. You're thankful that you don't have to go through that, at least not right at this moment, that you are in a better place, that you're in a different place. I mean, some of us, we've lived enough and we've been through enough and we've had to go through enough that we understand, man, what it's like to survive a thing, to get through a thing, to make it through something that other people aren't able to make it through. Man, this storm, it's not like, let me see if I can do a better picture with this. It's not like when the cowbells go off or the cow horns or whatever, you know, the sirens around, the air raid sirens that go off during like thunderstorms. It's not like a tornado is passing through Smiths Grove, but you live in Rockfield. So you're like, like it's a bad storm and, you know, it's hailing here, but at least there ain't a tornado ripping through our neighborhood. So like it's kind of scary. There's something to be afraid of, but it's not ripping my house apart right now. So it's not that kind of storm. This is the kind of storm where the tornado is ripping through your house, and man, you're just hunkered down in the bathtub, and you got your child underneath you, and man, you're just holding on to the faucet because that's connected to the wall. And if everything else blows away, you're just betting on the piping to remain and the tub to remain, and you are crying out and screaming out to God, God, don't let me die, or at least don't let my kid die. Like you're just trying to save some life in the moment. You're just hoping that as the tornado moves through your home, it doesn't take you out with it. It's like that kind of storm. It's a storm that they're fearing for their life in. It's a storm that hits them harder than they could have ever imagined. I mean, these guys are experienced fishermen. Some of you, man, you understand what it's like to have storms in your life that hit you harder than what you could possibly imagine, where the wind beats against you stronger than what you would have ever known to be true, where waves aren't just like knocking you from side to side, but they're coming over into your life, into your story, and you're just trying to survive it. I mean, that's the storm. That's the squall, this furious storm that they're going through, and they're right in the middle of it, and it's real. Jesus led them into it. They are right where they need to be. You can't look at their life and go, well, maybe if you had been a better follower of Jesus, maybe this wouldn't happen to you. Maybe you're just getting you're just reaping what you sow, brother. They are with Jesus. They are in his plan and in his purpose, and yet they're fighting the storm. So let me give you one more indicator. Let me give you a better indicator beyond storms in your life as an indicator of God at work, because that's true. It is an indicator, but here's another one. Are you doing what Jesus said to do? If you want to know a surefire indicator of whether or not you are in his plan and in his purpose for your life, are you doing what he's asked you to do? That's if you were doing what he's called you to do, if you got into the boat and crossed over because Jesus said, hey, let's go to the other side, and then the storm came against you, then at least you can know, man, I'm doing what he's called me to do. I can handle this because he's called me to it. I can get through this because I know that if God calls me into it, he's going to see me through it. If God has brought me into it, he's going to bring me out of it. He said, let's go to the other side. So I'm just going to remember for a moment that right now, I ain't on the other side yet. And if I ain't on the other side yet, then I'm not where Jesus is calling me to. So he's going to get me there. And I'm not going to get focused on this storm and on this drama and on this mess and on this problem, because that problem wants to pull me away from what he has for me. Man, God's got something better. And God's going to do something bigger. And this may be happening, and I can't understand it. But here, let me just share this with you as we go into the next part of it. If you're going through a storm right now and you're being faithful to what he's called you to do, God's going to use what you're going through. This series is about exposure. And so I want you to hear something this morning. There are some things you can't learn right here. I want you to come. I want you to invest in people and extend invitations to be a part of what God is doing in this place because God will change their life forever. I want you to do that, be a part of that, absolutely. Get all the good preaching you can get if you think it's good. Get all the good teaching you can get if you think it's good. But be a part of what God is doing in a place if you're excited about what God is doing in a place. But I'm just telling you, there are some things that you can't learn from good preaching. There are some things that you can't learn from good teaching. There are some things that you can't learn from singing a song, even though it's all true and it gives us an understanding. Sometimes God's got to bring you into a storm to teach you what he couldn't teach you otherwise. There is an exposure that you get with Jesus when you're going through a storm that you don't get with him when you're sitting in a pew. There's an exposure that Jesus will have with you when you're having to work through problems that you can't learn while you're sitting in a pew. And God's got a purpose in it. And what's powerful is that even if you walked into a storm that God didn't lead you into, he's powerful enough to do something with it. That's what I love about this passage. This furious squall comes up. It's breaking over the boat. It's nearly swamping it. That means like it's flooding the boat. That means it's like it's about to capsize. They're about to be flooded in it. And these guys are afraid for their life. But look at this next verse. Jesus was in the stern sleeping on a cushion. Asleep. Man, look at your neighbor and say, asleep? Asleep? Like he is sleeping on a cushion. Not this kind of sleep. You know how you're on a road trip, and some of you just came back from one, and you were driving down the road, and your battle buddy in the passenger seat, your partner in the passenger seat is supposed to keep you awake, right? They're supposed to be in there with you. It's like they're not driving the car, but they're in it to win it with you. Talked to my wife about this, but on the way, right, they're doing this number, you know? Maybe you've had that moment where like you were on a journey with somebody else, and they weren't driving so you could sleep. Y'all were in this together, but you were struggling to stay awake. And you know how you do when you do the head nod? Like you look with your eyes, but you don't move your head because you're just trying to see if they caught you, like doing the fall asleep. Okay, so that's not what Jesus is doing here, right? Jesus isn't like riding the boat, let's hit these waves, guys, come on. And then the rocking of the boat just no. It says that he was asleep on a cushion. That confuses us. When I think of cushion, I think of like the thing you sit in a hard chair to soften the blow. The cushion's on the pew so that you don't have to sit on wood while I talk the whole time. Like cushion, that kind of cushion. That's not this kind of cushion. This kind of cushion is Jesus made a bed. Now let this blow your world a little bit. Jesus got into that boat, said, let's cross over to the other side. Now he's God, right? He knows the storm is coming. Like, he knows what's about to happen. He makes a bed in the boat, puts cushions together, lays down on it, and goes to sleep on purpose. Not sitting in the chair next to Peter driving the boat, accidentally falling asleep. Jesus goes to sleep on purpose. The same storm that has them terrified, Jesus is sleeping through. And let me share a powerful truth with you that God just gave to me. I don't know if this is the only reason, but this has got to be a reason that Jesus was able to sleep through the same storm that they are terrified in. Jesus isn't afraid of what you're afraid of. Jesus ain't afraid of what you're afraid of. That's why he can sleep through it. That's why he made a bed. Jesus isn't afraid of what's consuming you. I know it's easy when we start talking about fear to try to apply it to apply it to like big, news-making situations where there was something to be scared of because somebody got violent and someone ended up, injured for life or dead. And I mean, it's easy to talk about fear in that respect. It's easy to think about problems and those big kind of problems, but some of you, isn't it way simpler than that, but just as powerful? It's a storm right here. I think it's why we sing the song the way we sing it and with the kind of excitement that we sing it. Lord, have your way in me. Like a mighty wind, like a mighty storm stirring within my soul. Because, man, there's a lot of other storms, that will stir in and it causes fear to rise up. But if his storm, because we understand storms again, right? But if his storm could just rage in us, maybe it would be enough to push that other storm out. Maybe it would be enough to push that other storm aside. Maybe it would be strong enough, to calm the fear. See, because Jesus isn't afraid of what we're afraid of. And I just needed to share that with you this morning, because for some of you, you're going through a thing right now, and the storm isn't metaphorical for you. The storm is real for you. It's a health thing. It's a marriage thing. It's a relationship thing. It's a work thing. It's a money thing, because you're trying to figure out, man, am I going to have enough tomorrow to make the house payment? You're just trying to figure out, do I got enough tomorrow to keep the electricity on, because they're gonna turn it off, and now it's 2 months behind, and maybe someone would have helped me if it was just 1 month behind, but I've let it get out of control, and now they're about to cut it off, and I'm just wondering if something's gonna happen, if something's gonna come through and make ends meet, and the storm is real for you. And I just wanted to share with you, regardless of how you got there, that Jesus isn't afraid of what maybe you're afraid of right now. And if you could just remember that, if you could just know that, maybe that's enough to bring you peace. The Bible speaks, we quote this all the time, a peace that surpasses all understanding. That's the kind of peace that surpasses all understanding. If ain't nothing going on in your life and you're like, I'm at peace, well, that makes sense. Yes. When all hell is breaking loose, in the most literal sense, in your life, because the enemy is coming against you and everything is falling apart, and you're able to be at peace, that's a peace that surpasses all understanding. That's a peace that doesn't make sense to the world. And Jesus is on a cushion, on purpose, asleep, not because he doesn't care, but because he's not afraid of the storm. The storm is what caused them to be afraid. Look at the next part of the passage. It says the disciples woke him, and I bet they did. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, man, don't you care if we drown?" I wonder how long Peter was just bailing water out of the boat before he even went to Jesus. I wonder how many buckets they had tried to throw out of the boat to get control of the situation before they just went and woke Jesus up. Probably completely frustrated, because that's what storms will do. Storms will cause fear to rise up in you, and storms will cause frustration to come out of you. Before they went to Jesus and said, "Teacher, Master, Jesus, don't you care if we drown?" Watch what happens, verse 39. He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." And then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. See, some of you, the storm is real. For some of you, you've gone through some storms, and you were calling out to Jesus, and he never answered. And you got mad and turned around and went back and hung out with the crowd and missed what he was trying to do in that moment. Right? They come crying out to him, and maybe this is helpful for you. Jesus didn't answer them right away either. When they came and woke him up, "Master, don't you care if we drown?" You know what Jesus said to them in response to their question? Nothing. Nothing. He didn't try to explain why it was happening. He didn't say, "Guys, calm down, I'm just trying to teach you something." No explanation. You know what he did? He got up and he spoke to the storm. That's what he did. "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Doesn't even talk to them. Speaks to the storm. Tells the wind to be still. Tells the waves to be calm. And all of a sudden, this storm that they are afraid of their life in is now been brought to complete peace by a word that came out of his mouth. I don't know who you're running to when you're going through whatever it is that you're going through, but man, you need to run to Jesus. I don't know who you're going to with the stuff that you're having to go through, but for some of you today, man, you need to go to Jesus. I know that we want to wake everybody else up when we're going through a thing, but what you really need to go to, man, you really need to go to Jesus when you're going through a thing. Some of you, man, you're going through storms, and I get it. I don't want to minimize what you're having to deal with and what you're having to go through, but man, you will text everybody else, but not go to Jesus. You need to go to Jesus and quit texting everybody else. You go and talk to everybody that you know who will get with you and get on your side when you're going through a thing so you can build an army up around you. And man, you need to go to Jesus, not those people. For some of you, I know you're going because you need to talk through a thing and you're trying to work a thing out and gain wisdom. I'm not telling you not to do that. You need to do that, but you also need to go to Jesus. Before you send the text message, go to Jesus because he'll change the text message. Before you get on social media and do that passive-aggressive, trying to make a point response, man, take it to Jesus. Because you're not going to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish on social media anyways. I'll go ahead and guarantee and write you a check for that. It's not going to work. Who you really need to go to is Jesus, because they went to Jesus, and even though he didn't speak to what they wanted him to speak to, because some of you, that's like, if you would just tell me, God, if you would just speak, God, I mean, I need to hear something. I don't feel like you're doing anything right now. I don't feel like you're talking right now. Well, he don't need to if he'll just take care of the storm. And he doesn't speak to them. He speaks to the thing that was coming against you. And I want you to hear this if you belong to God. If he's bringing you into it, he's going to bring you through it. I've already told you that, but I want you to hear it. And he ain't going to let that thing destroy you. He's not going to let what you're going through to get one over on you. He's got you in this. He brought you into it for a reason. And he's teaching you something. Not just about you. He's teaching you something about him. It's hard to understand the power of God if he never has to be powerful in your life. Right? It's hard to understand that he is your only hope until you figure out he's your only hope. And some of us, we want to hold on to so many things so tightly. Sometimes he's got to take them away. He's got to do something to cause you to loosen your grip for you to understand, I mean, I am your only hope. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? And Jesus stands up, he speaks to the wind, he speaks to the waves, and everything becomes still. It's completely calm. Verse 40. And he said to his disciples, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? When I read this, and I don't know if it hits you the same way, it's kind of like a crazy question, right? Why are you so afraid? I mean, come on, Jesus. What do you mean, why am I so afraid? I know that you were asleep over there, and I know that you were on a cushion, and you were sleeping through this whole thing, but I also understand that you're still God. So even though I can't hear you, and even though I don't see the effects of your work in my life right now, I know you're God, so I know that you know what's going on. I know that you're aware, even though it doesn't seem like you are. I'm afraid because of the storm. I'm afraid because, man, I've been able to handle things on the water before, but this right here, it's about to take me out. Like the waves are getting a little bit too big for my ability to try to control it and try to sail around it. Man, the wind is coming against me right now in a way that is way more powerful than I was expecting it to come against us. I mean, we're just trying to, this is the reason why we're afraid, Jesus. We're just trying to fight for our life. Man, we're trying to get through this thing. Like we're in a place where we feel like, man, we may not make it out of this. That's why I'm afraid, to which I wonder if Jesus goes, well, no wonder. Because instead of focusing on me, you got focused on the storm. And you become so focused on the drama, and it wasn't even your drama. It's somebody else's. You got so focused on the problem, you got so focused on the storm, it's not consuming you. No wonder it's all you think about. No wonder it's all you talk to people about. No wonder it's all you text about. No wonder it's all that you social media. No wonder, because you got consumed with it. No wonder you're afraid. Jesus says, but where's your faith? You don't have any faith either? Okay, I can get with you while you're afraid, but what about faith? And that's the thing. This is a struggle for the disciples throughout the Gospels. It's fear and faith. They're always associated with one another, and one is just opposed to the other. And you have a presence of fear in you that is always at war with faith in you. Because we have a preference, right, to be a faithful people for those of us who follow Jesus. Man, we want to go where Jesus wants us to go. We want to do what Jesus says to do. But there's always this possibility, especially in storms, for fear to rise up and take a precedence over faith. The disciples struggle with this time and time again, and Jesus says, why are you afraid? Why are you so afraid? Are you still afraid? Where is your faith? Why do you have no faith? They had every reason to have faith. Every reason. Man, this is Mark chapter 4. You ever read Mark 2 and 3? Mark chapter 2, Mark chapter 3, so many people have their lives changed. I mean, it would just, we don't even know the number of people. So many people have been healed of disease and illness and demon possession. We don't even know the number. It's so many people. Spoken words that, but whoever your favorite preacher is, Jesus can preach better than your favorite preacher. They heard Jesus preach, not people like me who preach what Jesus preached. They heard it from the man, like himself, got the amen Jesus with it, got to tell people about what Jesus said, literally. They had every reason to have faith. And Jesus is like, come on, boys. Like, you still have no faith after all you've seen? After all you've been through with me? After all you've seen me do in just 2 chapters? No faith? Where's your faith at? I'm in the boat with you. I mean, don't you know that if you've seen me do as many miracles as you've seen, that I got at least one more in me? But it's hard. I get it. Because we find ourselves here. I mean, we're not far from the disciples, right? It's hard sometimes to remember what Jesus did yesterday when we're going through a storm today. And that's the reality of it. Sometimes it's just hard to remember what God did 2 weeks ago when we're going through a storm today. And part of faith is just remembering that God's in the boat. I mean, this ain't bigger than him. That God's got this. So he calls him out and he says, why are you afraid? You still have no faith. And maybe some of you all came to church today to hear this if you don't hear anything else. Man, don't allow fear. Don't allow the possibility of fear. Don't allow the presence of fear in your life to overcome what God wants to do in you through faith. Don't let the drama take center stage and put Jesus on a back burner. You know what Jesus is trying to teach them through the storm? That there's something worth being afraid of, but it ain't what you're afraid of. I mean, look at this last passage. Jesus speaks to him and says, that's what he says to him. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? And Jesus says, let me ask you some questions. What are you so afraid of? Where's your faith? And then verse 41, it says they were terrified. And they asked each other, man, who is this? That even the wind and the waves obey him. They were afraid of a storm, but in verse 41, they're terrified not of the storm, of who? Jesus. Now, we don't preach that in church because it doesn't preach well. Because we want you to love Jesus, not be afraid of him. Do you notice, though, in this passage that he doesn't correct them? He doesn't say, oh, no, boys, you got it all wrong. I'm sorry that I made you terrified. That was not my intent. I did not mean to terrify you. I want you to love me because I love you. That's what he was teaching them. You want something to be afraid of? Don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of the storm. The storm is not worth being afraid of. If you really got to be scared of a thing, be scared of me. This don't preach well either. Jesus said, don't fear the one who could destroy your body. Fear the one who could destroy both body and soul. Yeah, that don't preach well. I know it doesn't preach well. I know that's a hard word, but I needed to share it with you this morning. Because right now, for some of you, you've got people in your life who are actively coming against you. And they're trying to destroy you. They're trying to destroy your reputation. They're trying to destroy your family. They're trying to get back from you something that they feel got taken from them, and they're going to come at you. And maybe right now for some of you, they're coming at you with everything they can come at you with just to try to get one up over on you. And they're trying to destroy you. And Jesus says, quit focusing on that. Don't you know if I could speak to the wind and the waves, I can speak to that? If I'm letting it go on in your life, don't worry, I've got something coming in this. Don't be afraid of the one who's trying to destroy you, even though that's a real thing for some of you. Don't be afraid of the one who's trying to destroy your marriage right now. Don't be afraid of the one who's trying to destroy the relationships with your children right now. Don't be afraid of the one who's trying to destroy your job right now and your financial security. Man, don't be afraid of all that. And the storm out here, man, don't even be afraid of that, because you can't do nothing about that stuff. The creation is out of order right now. We're living in a world that sin messed up everything. And so it's spinning out of control. You're not going to be able to mitigate that. You're not going to be able to maintain that. You're not going to be able to do anything about that. So quit trying to control something you can't control, and quit being afraid of it. He's trying to teach them, man, there's something else. I mean, if you want to be afraid, don't be afraid of that storm. Look what I can do. See, they knew that Jesus could do something. Know that? They did. Otherwise, why wake Jesus up? Otherwise, why go, Jesus, don't you care if we drown? They knew he could do something. They didn't know he was going to do that. It's a story to us. It's a story. We know the story. They had no idea that Jesus would get up and speak to the wind, speak to the waves, and bring it all to peace. No idea. That's why they went, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Because in the ancient world, unlike today's world, everybody was religious. Everybody knew. Only God could command wind and waves. Only God. No human being has power over wind and waves. Who is this? So I came to tell you one last thing. Whatever it is that you're going through, and I get it, man. Some of you guys are going through some things. Jesus can handle it. If he can speak to the wind and he can speak to the waves, he can handle whatever it is that you're going through, okay? And I wanted you to know that because, man, there are people here at this church that right now they're just trying to hold their marriage together, okay? And they're showing up because they're wondering, man, can God do something? And I want you to hear something this morning. He can handle this. There are people at this church, man, they're just trying, they really are trying to figure out this week how they're going to feed their kids. Did you know we have people at the church, some of you, this blows you away. They're trying to figure out this week how they're going to feed their kids. They are thankful that school is coming back tomorrow. Because they know at least at school they'll get a meal, right? And then they got to figure out the other part of it. But at least at school they can get breakfast and they can get lunch. And they're trying to figure out dinner. That's not a hypothetical situation. That's real life for some people here. Do you know there are kids here at this church who show up every single week, and this is refuge for them. This is hope for them. Because their mama and daddy, they don't go here. And for some of them, they don't even know who their daddy or their mama is. And they come here because for a day, for a few hours, they get loved on. And they go through not one of our children's churches, but two of them. You know why? Because they can. And I want them to. And they'll get a donut while they're here. And there are families here at this church that 2 months ago, man, the storm was so bad. This is a real family. This is actually a couple of real families that I know about. The storm was so bad, they were going to get a divorce. And they were going to lose kids. They didn't even go to church here 2 months ago. But somebody who was invested in them who knew him said, you know what? Have you tried church? Have you tried Jesus? Have you considered that? And then they showed up here. And I didn't ask them permission. That's why I'm just kind of keeping the details a little vague. But you know what God's doing in their life today? They're not getting a divorce anymore. Yeah. God's done a thing in their life, and it's just completely changed. That was a storm that Jesus spoke to. He spoke to that storm in their life and has brought it to a place of peace and healing. Nobody threw money at their situation. Nobody gave them something of 12 steps to walk through. Jesus spoke to the storm in a way that we didn't even know was happening and changed their life. So I don't know what you came in here with, and I don't know what you're going through. I just came to tell you today that if he can handle the wind and the waves, he can handle what you're going through. Because by the way, and you don't have this verse, this is chapter 5, verse 1, because we ended chapter 4 with verse 41. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes, and when Jesus got out of the boat, and I'll just stop right there because that's evidence that they made it to the other side. They got to exactly where Jesus had called them to. And some of you, Jesus has called you from death into life, and you're going to make it. And you may have to go through some moments of storms and problems and hell and whatever it looks like to come to life, but Jesus is going to get you to the other side. He is not done with you yet. This is just the beginning. I don't know what you're having to go through right now, but here's what I know. If you'll just go to Jesus, if he ain't already with you, if you'll go to him, he'll get with you. And he'll turn it for good. He'll turn it for good. And he'll do something nobody else can do. Be still. And Jesus can speak, be still into your life. That'll change everything right there. Be still. So some of you, storms are raging right now, and right now you're going through it alone because you don't have a relationship with Jesus. And you ain't got to go through it alone anymore. I'm telling you, there's a God who is greater than what you're going through. And I just want to invite you to give your life to him, okay? Can we have that moment right now? And then we'll do what we got to do to bring this to a close. But just let's bow our heads and close our eyes. If you're here this morning and you don't have a relationship with Jesus, you recognize, you realize, you understand, man, you are going through a storm. You are going through a problem. You're dealing with what you're dealing with right now the way you've always had to deal with it. You're alone. I want to invite you to a relationship where you will never be alone again. I want to invite you to get with Jesus right now. And I just don't know of a better way to do that than through prayer. So I want to invite you to pray with me. And pray this prayer out loud. Pray it to yourself. Just pray with me right now. Lord Jesus,